Hello, gorgeous. This is not going to be a very peppy video or polished. I just felt an urge to get on here and tell you guys here's why you should keep your standards high. Whoever needs to hear this, stay until the end. Lions don't eat grass because everyone around them does. You do not do things that everyone around you does because you're not average and you're not making average moves. You probably have to start doing very basic things, but then you become yourself. And I've always been around the similar type of person my entire adult life because I chose these people. What I expect from myself is extremely high. So my base standards are pretty high when it comes to everything and everyone around me in general. Growing up, I always saw my parents do this. They would immediately write people off because they didn't live their life to a certain standard and were always the best they could be personally with zero excuses. That's a good boundary to set and how I was for a lot of my adult life. So if they told us don't smoke, they didn't smoke. If they told us don't do this, they didn't do this. We never caught them doing those things. I thought it was kind of harsh when they instantly wrote people off for doing it, but the reason I learned why. This comes with a healthy balance of being soft and understanding with people, but also being flexible with understanding them, but not entirely letting them take all of you. I'll get into this. As I grow older, the more I realize my logic prevails over my emotions. My standard has become louder, it's become clearer, not only because of my experience, but because I surround myself with a ton of people who are way more seasoned, way more experienced, supporting me, and they declared logic over emotion. They say, hey, you gotta do the thing that you're originally doing. You're the one who usually talks me logically out of these things, and I'm the one having the emotion. This time it's you. These are people that I call the audience of the labyrinth in this case. The labyrinth is a social phenomenon my friends and family talk about that you may have experienced without realizing it. You are in a labyrinth. There is an audience watching you in the labyrinth from a bird's eye view. They're on top looking down at you and they know exactly where to go. They say, go left, but there's a monster coming in from the right. However, you are in the labyrinth, so you cannot hear them. So you go left and suffer a fatality. Recently, I've been suffering these casualties because I loosened my standards. I let people into my heart and showed people my world that convinced me that straying away from my standards was a benefit. They say, no, if you're easygoing about these things, then you'll be fine. Nothing's gonna hurt you. So they would make my standards seem odd or abnormal. And in other words, they couldn't grasp the idea that I have those standards for a solid reason. They would literally question me or simply not believe that that's ridiculous. Why would you think this way? Or why do you do that? So people use a lot of talking in a very condescending way to make you feel like you're the problem, like you're the one with the issues. Once I was organizing the coffee table, they say, oh, you have OCD? And I said, no, I'm a neat person. Are you excusing how you are a slob because you don't have OCD, because you don't have an issue? I don't understand. For example, they would also say, why do you wake up super early or work this much? Because they don't see the reward in the short term. When I'm working on my computer, they have no idea what I do, so they think what I do is easy, or they think it's simple, and they'll talk to me while I'm working, and I have earphones in it because I'm trying to focus my full attention, but they don't get the point. Or they think in order to move, you just move your things, where it's absolutely not that easy. I moved across the country, and there are all these legal paperworks and insurance and endless bills I had to sign off on. They don't see the process, and they just want the result. They simply don't believe in the long-term payout because they don't see it yet. We see the reward, they see the risk. I'm not into get rich quick schemes like getting rich from social media overnight virality or putting every penny I have into crypto. People who don't see the bigger picture of me working towards something slowly over time with small goals every day is a good thing. Who you are is the everyday building muscle that builds character. But people with a smaller scope only believe in the results, but even then, only somewhat. The thing is, even when you present results to these people, they're still not satisfied. If you apologize, it's not enough. If you show them all the great work you did, they think it's not enough, it's not good enough, or it's derivative, or you used someone else's money, power, connections to get to where they are, because for the longest time, they only saw you struggling. They resent you, they feel some kind of way, feel some sort of jealousy, and cannot stomach the idea of you doing well. People don't like what they don't know, and the problem is they fill in the blanks with only what they know. They don't know a lot, and you don't know what you don't know. You only can fill in the blanks with what you can reference, not things other people have done because they don't have that experience. These are people you can't really have a conversation with, or a productive one anyway, and can't have a decent theolocution. Personally, I roll my eyes and kind of laugh because it's so absurd. I've experienced this where people promulgate mediocrity and believe and live their absurdity. I was dating this guy who did not understand English very well. I don't mind because I speak 6 languages and he speaks 3, so we would come in the middle sometimes. The problem was, in English, there are lots of false cognates in French, meaning the same word in different languages have 2 different meanings. He thought that he was correct, which he was, but in his language. But I was correct in the language that I was referring to because I was the one doing the explaining. Sometimes I could tell that he didn't understand me and would just keep nodding, but he had no input. He would confuse what I said routinely to the point where I would have to repeat myself 3 times and in 3 different levels of dumb is what I call it. So 3 different levels of understanding. So I say it this way, I explain it this way, I break it down simpler. I would water every single little thing that I said and simplify as much as possible for him to understand. This meant we could only talk on his level of comprehension. I realized early on that we couldn't talk about a lot of things because we didn't have basic things in common that were everyday things that I like to talk about. I couldn't talk to him about aviation. I'm working on flight school. I couldn't talk to him about politics because he didn't really have a standing on it. Say, for example, I was worried about the price of Nutella, these type of politics that are local to me. He was worried about a war in another place. He's also complaining about the things going on here, but he doesn't understand even how taxes work. He thinks that the hospital is free. And I said, no, the hospital's not free. We pay taxes for this. He said, no, the government pays for it. And I said, yeah, who do you think is paying the government? People do. People pay taxes. These were things that came up because I went to the hospital, and these were everyday things that were going on in our reality. These are things that we could talk about. It's not like I'm just picking them out of the air to create a problem. I could only talk to him about animals and cars, literally, without getting into a disagreement. Back to what I was saying, he never read and never spoke in English with his friends. All his friends were from his country. And when you read, it opens up your vocabulary. And strangers tell him his English is good. I told him that they're being polite because in that situation it's good. They can understand him. I used to work at this company in another country where we were hiring people from all around the world because it was an international company. And they said they spoke English. On the resume, we would speak to them in English. They couldn't really form a proper sentence that had decent grammar. I can't even form a sentence right now because I drank, this is my, 2.5 coffee? Sorry, so jittery. Anyway, what I realized is their English is good for that country. Their English is good for China. Their English is good for Pakistan. Their English is good for Russia. In this company that we were working, it was truly international. People could write at a C3 level of English. That's a really good grasp of professional English. I told him the truth that you don't really practice English unless you're with me. Even so, you have a hard time, and I don't pick you apart because I love you, and your grammar is not the best, but I'm not going to correct you every single thing you say. I'll correct every 10 things, because if I corrected every single part of your grammar, we would be here forever. We would be in constant fights. This is not me being rude. I've gotten awards for my speaking and writing. I'm very clear and precise, especially with those I love, because I don't want to mix things up at all. I couldn't have a regular conversation without me breaking things down like a 10-year-old and not talking the way I normally do. I could never have a flowing thought. You guys know I read 4 books a week. Sometimes I'll read 2 books a day. I listen to podcasts of exceptionally articulate people. The only time his English would grow was when we got in an argument. I would speak clearly and succinctly so he understood everything, especially in an argument, to get my point across and to try to understand him better. So say, for example, he would curse, and he cursed a lot, and he would say, this t-shirt, it's effed up. And I said, what do you mean? He said, it's effed up. And I say, but in what way? He said, it's just effed up. And I say, no, is it creased? Is it stained? Are there holes? Are there stitches coming out? Is it shrunken? What's the issue? So I would ask him, I would try to pull teeth and get him to learn to use his words. And I'm not deliberately forcing him to speak English. I'm just trying to understand what he means when he says this very broad point. When we would argue, I would try to be very clear. It sometimes would sound rude, but the thing is, his English vocabulary was not broad enough to understand nuance, for one thing, and then to understand vocabulary. Those are 2 completely different notions. I said one time, he doesn't understand the expression, a lot of it expressions and idioms that we have in English. So I said, I really look forward to settling down with you. He said, what? What do you mean? And I said, that's a really sweet thing for anybody to say or anybody to hear in the English language. If you tell that to anyone, they'll melt. He got really offended, and I thought, what am I doing? His English would get better in arguments because I would say, that's an insolent thing to say, or you've defenestrated my idea entirely. That's how I regularly talk, and I'm not reaching. My friends who are lawyers have an even bigger vocabulary because they read for a living. I learn things when I'm with them. The worst excuse I heard was, that's the way I talk. I wanted to tell him to fix it, but if I did, he would get super mad. The normal old me would say that. The normal old me that didn't considerably value human relationships to be stronger than what I thought before, that old me would be very blunt. So I thought, he says that's the way I talk, love him anyway, and say, okay, just love him the way he is. He says he wants to get up early, but he never sets his alarm and sleeps in. Let him sleep in. It doesn't hurt anyone. That's okay. He says being rude is how he is. Let him be rude. But I let it slide because he knows I love him. He said, I can say it to you, but you can't say it to me because my feelings get hurt. Take it and let him stay. I have no idea why. Eventually, I got used to this treatment, and my friends and family have offered me money to leave this person. When the LA fires happened in my neighborhood, they offered me a place to stay, but not him. They said, you can stay here for a year if you want, but don't bring him over. Don't bring him closest. I hate what he did. And they asked why I'm dating him when I first introduced the idea of him to my friends. It took me a minute to answer, and I was reaching. Every single person asked, why are you dating him? Why are you with this person? Everyone was shaking and their eyes were big, and my friends don't really react. They're very calm people. I realized that this person leaves a trail of problems everywhere they go for no reason. That's aside the point. But they would say, my friends would say, there's this, there's that, there's this, there's that. Why are you with him? You know that you are too good for this situation, for how this person treats you. Surround yourself with good people. The crazier thing was his bar was on the floor for standards, so he didn't believe my lifestyle, even though he saw it for himself. People are that delusional that they will warp things to fit their narrative. When I did something a little bit different out of the routine that he was familiar with, it completely obscured his reality. Perhaps I failed in making him feel secure, but that's also not 100% of my doing. I genuinely did everything I could, as I give every relationship 110%. I give way too much where I should not. My ex, previous to him, from years ago, he called and we're still friendly. So we've been talking over the years just here and there about work things because I generally have good relationships with everyone I know. We are friendly, but we're not friends. We're convivial. He didn't understand the idea of being civil, the new guy. So he leaves a storm everywhere he goes and blocks everyone he throws away. So he didn't expect me to have exes because he thought the world works that way. Other people are like that too. My ex is highly successful and a big personality, well known in the media. The new guy threw a tantrum at the time, not feeling good enough, and then saying, why is he calling you? He has people for that. I had to clarify that I am his people. He reached out for a work project, not to hang out, not to spend time, just be friends. The new guy belittled me because he didn't understand what I do for a living. He said he could replace me with anyone, but I told him I'm from his original team. And he felt really small. I could see that. And he's like, how am I supposed to match up to this guy? I'm like, you're not. That was from years ago. If it makes you feel better, it's never coming up. I'll turn down the money. That doesn't even cross my mind, but I just want to make sure that this was purely a business thing, a work thing. He was saying he's a sugar daddy. When I told him that, oh, it's a work thing, I said, no, we worked together and dated after I left. And I don't know why that comes to his mind because perhaps he had an experience with that. But what I've learned is we give people too much credit, whether it's for our own happiness or fault. We put the credit or blame on others, depending on how you see it. Our body is the one releasing the chemical. It's us. We attribute it to being around them when the truth is we bring it out ourselves. We drop our guard. We love people. Whether it's consciously or unconsciously, a lot of average people don't believe in my lifestyle and the things I do, which is okay. Even though they see it with their own eyes, which is crazy, that's just altering reality. People who have not experienced exactly what you did have a hard time believing that these things are possible. They think their way of life reigns supreme. It's a weird perspective. If people know that smoking is bad, but they do it anyway. They sleep in too late and then they feel awful. They do it anyway. They think those who choose not to for the sake of their health have a superiority complex when they're simply projecting their guilt and weakness because they don't have the strength to say no and the discipline to get up or to not smoke. The reason I'm telling you this is because I need to present this personal information to remind myself this is over. I'm not doing this anymore. And usually when I post about it, it becomes real. And this is also for whoever needs it. You can replay this when you have those moments of weakness and doubt. You need to remind yourself because I have so many people screaming at me saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. No, 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 no. And I didn't listen. And I wasted 7 months of learning hard lessons. I'm lucky to have friends asking, do you know who you are? This past year felt like one step forward, two steps back in 2024 up till now. I'm lifting myself up again because it's not all bad. If I could only incorporate what my friends and family have into a partner, that's a whole other topic. So surround yourself with people of the level where you want to be. Keep those standards high and stick to them because they will get you far.